Welcome back to News Channel 3 Live at 9. Imagine this, around the world, 1 in every 3 women has been abused in some way during their lifetime.
And women do make up the majority of all domestic abuse victims. And October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Mr. Miles Mason is an attorney dealing in family law. Miles, welcome back to Live at 9. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Kind of surprised here. In these days and times, domestic violence, does it continue to rise or has it leveled off any in recent years? What are we seeing?
Domestic violence is a terrible problem. As far as whether the incidents have risen or lowered over the last few years, it's almost impossible to tell because the statistics are so overwhelming and that so few organizations actually track for this in terms of figuring out what's increasing or decreasing. What we do know is that state of Tennessee agencies still receive over 50,000 calls a year.
Wow.
For people that need assistance in various ways. And we know those statistics are just still outrageous even today.
Why is it so hard for women to get out of a situation like
That's
this?
a great question, because the person committing the violence is the person they trust the most and care about the most, and they feel like, well, most of the time someone apologizes to them, so I won't do it again. But without counseling, without help, the cycle of violence tends to not stop.
Miles, what about economics playing a factor in it as well? Because a lot of times you might have a spouse they'll be going through a great deal of violence. They want to pull away, but they don't have any type of income.
Exactly, and that's one of the reasons why I'm here, is to tell people there are resources to help. Take Sophia's House, who's a part of Associated Catholic Charities. They'll give you housing, they'll give you food, they'll help you get training for an extended period of time so you can reintroduce yourself into the workforce.
I can see a woman being willing to stay if she was the only one involved, willing to continually forgive. But since it is such a generational thing, and as I understand it, children in homes where there's abuse are so much more likely to either be abusers or be abused. Does it make it easier to reach a woman to get her to leave if she has kids, and you can say what you're doing is you are creating a situation for your children in the next generation just by staying?
I don't think guilt will help. What it's going to take, in my experience, is someone who's close to the abused person. And don't forget, statistics show between 5 and 15% of the time it's the male that's abused.
Really?
So let's not just say that it's a male violence on female issue.
Between 5 and 15% of the time?
Yes, different statistics show that. Now, what you need to do is get somebody, a support person, to really step in and help. Show them that there's help. Explain to them that's a problem, and then without some type of intervention or counseling, that cycle of violence is not going to end.
But Miles, suppose I don't have access to that type of help. Is it out there, or?
It is. You've got Sophia's House, you've got the Exchange Club, you've got Salvation Army, and you've got a whole network, YWCA. Right. And if it's tremendously immediate, and there's a problem right that second, the Memphis Police Department has a domestic violence unit that coordinates with all the agencies to get somebody to a shelter that's in an undisclosed location, and only the police and other people within the system know where these houses are. For example, I represent clients who have been abused and are in these houses, but I'm not allowed to know where they are.
Do women and men in this situation tend to feel like they don't trust the system either, that the system's really not going to help them?
Trust is a big issue, and that's one of the first things I think that people work on when they get with a mental health professional, to start figuring out how to sift through these problems and get to the light of day.
And of course, we hear about, as we've already pointed out, how many times, obviously women are affected by this, but going back on something you were saying about the number of men as well, what are some of the factors, Miles, for men maybe staying in a relationship? Why can't they pull away?
Very same factors, but with men you have the embarrassment, and that just closes them down.
They don't want to tell anyone.
Right, and I've represented several men that have been in abusive relationships, and where they've had severe injuries, and they would never tell anybody except for somebody like me who was their lawyer.
Oh my gosh. What do you do to tell someone if you see someone in a situation, and you can always, sometimes the vision is so much clearer from outside the relationship, you can see that it's going down this path, there are signs and symptoms. what are some of those symptoms, and how do you approach someone who you care about and you see that this may be the future? How do you do that?
Right, that's a lot of questions, but I'll try to take it. First, the signs, very clear. Usually some type of physical trauma, trips to the doctor, cuts, bruises, broken items around the house. Second, I recommend people get their clergy involved, whether it be a priest, rabbi, pastor, get them to help. Many of the clergy and the pastors in the Memphis area are very experienced with this. They have very wise things to say and have experience in trying to get that person to some professional help. And then finally, one of the most important things is get the abuser into some type of counseling. A lot of times, if someone admits that they have a problem and seeks help, that you can solve the problem long term.
And I know we also talked about sometimes it can be a generational thing, but what else does the abuser, Miles, get out of it? Is it a sense of empowerment over another person, the reason they do it? So
that's a great question. I don't know the answer to that, but I suspect it's mostly a rage, an internal rage. The very common scenario is Fridays. Somebody got off of work, you're tired, you're angry, and frustrated. You just got to check, maybe you just got a bottle of some sort of alcohol, and then it unleashes. And that's what they talk about with the pattern of violence, that the triggers often are very similar for a particular family unit.
And what about signs before the abuse starts? Is there verbal abuse generally? Is there jealous?
That's a great question. As we have many different types of families, we have many different situations in domestic violence. What makes it so difficult is that the first incidence of violence could be death or very severe pain and suffering. We have this on the news all the time, where we had a fireman murder his family not too long ago. Well, that, from what I understood, that may have been one of the very first incidents. Right. There was no protective order. There was no legal part of the process.
So there may not be any sign.
Exactly. And then other situations you have a very common escalation of terror. It might start out with some physical abuse, some verbal abuse, and then slowly build up, maybe throwing objects, and then finally hitting and culminating and escalating.
Wow.
And that's when you absolutely have to get out and get that person some help. Don't mess around with this, because the children are at issue, and because the violence can escalate really at any moment.
For more information, there's a couple of websites. The first one will get you to places where that can actually get you help, and MemphisDivorce.com will get you some great advice as well from Miles and his partners. Thank you.
Miles,
thank you.